Good afternoon and welcome to the final meeting of this cycle of the Community Parks and Leisure Policy Committee. Nice to see members, officers and members of the public, and for those who are watching via the webcast. We have received one petition and 4 public questions from one member of the public, which we'll take shortly. Please can I request that mobile telephones and other such equipment to switch to silent mode so as not to disturb the conduct of the meeting. Having sat through one about an hour ago, there is no fire test planned for the rest of the day. I'm pleased. If there is an emergency evacuation, please take instruction from the Town Hall staff. The assembly point is Tudor Square. I'm now going to ask each member of the committee to introduce themselves, and I would like the officers to introduce themselves as and when they come to speak. Alan.
Councillor Alan Hooper, Councillor of the West Ecclesfield Ward.
Councillor Rob Rice, Councillor for the East Ecclesfield Ward.
Marianne Elliott, Green Councillor for Gleadus Valley.
Councillor Brian Holmeshaw, I'm the Councillor for Bromhill and Shire Vale, and I'm substituting for Councillor Bernard Little.
Councillor Shonard Meyer Richards, Councillor for Manor Castle, substituting for Janet Riddler.
Councillor Karen McGowan, Burley Ward.
Councillor Tony Downey, Mossborough Ward.
Councillor Gary Weatherall, Shire Green, Brightside Ward.
Thank you and welcome to our 2 substitutes today. It's nice to see you both. Apologies for absence. We have, you'll take that?
Yeah, apologies from Councillor Bernard Little and Councillor Janet Riddler.
There's no other apologies?
No others.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, item 2 is exclusion to the public and press. There are no items today that have been identified as requiring exclusions for the press and public. Item 3, declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest they wish to raise? I'll take that as a no. Minutes of the meeting, page 11 of the agenda pack. I'll read out each page and then if you wish to make a point, please raise. Page 11. Page 12. Page 13. Page 14. Page 15. Page 16. Page 17. And page 18. Nobody's indicated anything, so we'll take those minutes as approved. Thank you. The next item is item 5, which is public questions and petitions. I will take the petition first, and then I will take the public questions, if that's okay. The petition, I believe, is Mr. Gilbert. If you'd like to come here. Thank you very much. Your petition did arrive late, but I felt that if I didn't take it today, then it wouldn't come to this committee before June, which is an extraordinarily long period of time. So I felt it appropriate to take the petition today. Officers haven't had a chance to prepare an answer, but you will of course get a full written answer in due course.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, that's my fault. I misread the email, thinking that the attachment was the usual security issues and didn't read it through. And it was only on Friday that I was pointed out that I'd made a horrible mistake. So my apologies. Oh, I don't. Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Shall I carry on, Chair? Thank you. Well, I'll introduce myself. My name is John Gilbert, and I'm a committee member of the Bee Chief Environment Group, hence the new jumper, and organiser of the Bee Chief Monday Group, That's of the working group that operates with 10 to 15 volunteers roughly every Monday, and we carry out work in the area on behalf of the council as agreed by their officers. And our work includes all sorts of things, mainly path work, creating paths, surfacing them, maintaining them, repairing steps. We also work in the nature park at Bechief, which I hope you're aware of is the largest one in the city, and we manage that on behalf of the council. We repair dry stone walls, construct benches, tree planting. We've planted about 500 trees in the area. We also have worked in the Abbey grounds and in the hamlet, plus lots of other things. To carry out these tasks, we use one of the workshops in the barns to store our tools and our equipment and materials. Also, as a side issue, I was also the treasurer at Bechief Golf Club for 19 years, so I'm well acquainted with the greenkeepers and with the course managers. So what's the barns? Where are they? These are grade 2 listed buildings. There are 4 workshops and a larger barn in an L shape, the larger barn across the base, all joined together. They are at the south of the old farmhouse that's now a private residence, just south of the Abbey, and it forms part of the conservation area. The barns must be at least 200 years old, built of local stone and roofed with either flagstone or slates. They are used and have been used for many years by Bechief Golf Course as the greenkeepers' workshops and the storage areas, but they are owned by the council. The barns are in a poor state of repair, as no maintenance has been carried out on them for at least 30 years. And I met one of the original older members of the golf club, who said that he'd not seen anything for 40 years that they've been in. The operator of the golf course is SIV, now called Sheffield City Trust, and it is not required to carry out any maintenance as part of their contract. So what's happened? In early December, the main roof support, that's the A-frame across, one of the workshops, collapsed, nearly bringing down the roof, and it's now very dangerous. There's no way anybody should go in there. Sheffield City Trust carried out their own survey and decided that the whole of the place was dangerous, unsafe, and immediately built a fencing all the way round. Now, I don't believe that their surveyor entered our workshop, which I believe is perfectly safe. So what about the protest? Well, there's been lots of local concerns, as you can imagine, and lots of people have signed the petition because the barns have been allowed to deteriorate to such an extent that they can't be used, hence the petition. So rather than just complain, I think we ought to at least attempt some positive outcomes. How might there be a solution? And the first one to me is very clear, is that because the buildings are used by the golf course, there should be a maintenance budget. I mean, what other organisation uses buildings that doesn't maintain them? Dare I say that, 40 years, you hadn't spent a penny on this building. It would then cover certainly immediate needs. As a solution to getting the greenkeepers back in place in the main barn, repairs to the slate roof could be fairly easily done, along with clearing out all debris and rubbish that's been collected there for years. You can make the barns more accessible by widening the doors, because the greenkeepers have said they can't get some of their machines in there. And the other thing, this would save the cost of hiring, renting more containers for the greenkeepers that is currently on the car park by the clubhouse. And finally, could I just refer you to one of your own documents dated the 19th of March 2007, 17 years ago, entitled Beechief Abbey Conservation Area Proposals. It states, amongst other things, that the barn, in particularly the main barn at the back, is in a poor state of repair, and it recommends, and I quote, effective repairs to make them water and weatherproof tight should be carried out, and that condition should be monitored and appropriate steps taken to secure their future. It also suggested that a review should be carried out every 5 years and possibly carried out under guidance by community groups. Well, I can assure you that Beechief Environment Group, Monday Group, is very much up for that, and we'd welcome it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert, for your petition, and thank you also for providing some solutions or potential solutions to what needs to be done. As I said, obviously, we've only just got this, so what I will do is commit to have a meeting quickly and urgently with the appropriate officers to reflect on your petition, see what can be done, and I will get back to you. We now move to public questions, and I would like to invite Rosemary Telfer, Chair of the Friends of Norfolk Heritage Park, to come forward and ask your questions. Thank you. If you like, you've got, I think it's 5 questions. Do you want to ask one question, then I'll respond to that, rather than do all 5? Thank you. Would you like to put on the...
Button. That is. Thank you. Thank you. My name's Rosemary Telfer. I'm the chair of Friends of Norfolk Heritage Park. Now, the Friends were formed in 1994, and our purpose is to protect the park from decline and misuse. We joined with Sheffield Council and other community partners to work on successful bids and raised £2.4 million. And due to everyone's hard work, the centre in the park and a new playground were open for the public to use. So we have a history of working with Sheffield City Council, and I'd like to say here that that's exactly what we want to continue to do. Last year, Parks and Countryside staff moved from Moorfoot to the centre in the park, and we welcome this, and we've established good relationships with the staff, and we share premises, ideas and goodwill. And our other strength, I'd like to say, is the involvement of local councillors in our work and plans. And I want to here thank councillors Richards and Moynihan for the input. But so we're disappointed then that despite this network of trust and with the common aim of regenerating and maintaining this lovely park, we have outstanding issues which we cannot seem to progress. And I'm asking the committee on behalf of the 54 members of the Friends group and of the users of this wonderful open space to help us find ways to make it possible for the necessary works to be carried out to ensure that Norfolk Park is an accessible and a safe environment for the whole city to enjoy. So, do we look at question 1, Chair? Would you like me to? We did a survey, the Friends did, and we did it online, and we printed copies out. We got quite a lot of responses, and it clearly showed we have so little engagement from users under the age of 25. With big open spaces, the space for football and for other games, it needs strategy, and it needs some joint working, and it needs a forward plan. And the Friends can't do this on their own. So my question is, what work has been done to encourage the use of our park by young people? And are there any plans that maybe we haven't seen that can, for our youth groups to be encouraged to use the open spaces that we've got.
Okay, thank you. Parks and Countryside have confirmed to me that there are some family learning activities in the park, ranging in the summer months particularly, provided by Children's Services, who set up a gazebo outside the centre in the park and bring their mobile library. I know that's a fact because I've been there myself to see it, and it's subject to the weather. The day I went last year, it was a beautiful day, and there were loads of families there, and they're having great fun. That's a good thing. In addition to this, the youth club operates from the centre in the park weekly, I believe. I will ask officers to contact appropriate council services to highlight the opportunities you're suggesting. I also think that it might be worth getting a meeting between the Friends group and appropriate officers to see how we can kind of accelerate this. Thank you.
Thank you, that's great.
Yes, Councillor.
If you don't mind, Councillor Williams, if I could just make what I hope is a helpful intervention, a suggestion here, which is that what I think is that what is missing from the answer is a response to about consultation and engagement with the young people themselves. Yes. So I think that is an important element here in going forward. This thing that we keep calling co-production, working with the young people. So I was going to say, you know, perhaps those family activities could then have a survey form attached to it, or the youth club. It could be surveyed during the youth club time.
Thank you.
That sounds like a very good idea.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you want me to move on to the next question?
Yes,
Chair?
please.
Anybody who's seen the notice boards in Norfolk Park, they were very expensive, they weren't put in, but they are mostly rotted, difficult to use, and some of them are just being vandalised. I don't know, we don't know who is responsible for replacing those notice boards. As I say here, I did put in a bid for the ward pot money, and it wasn't successful. Could you check and see who actually owns those notice boards and who's responsible for their upkeep? And even if it is Sheffield City Council, I want it, you know, on record that the Friends will work together with the council and put in a funding bid to the appropriate place to get them replaced. But I can't find a way forward.
Okay, thank you. Fair point. Again, Parks and Countryside have actually confirmed that they are already doing some investigation to gather costings so that we can find out exactly what it's going to cost. Once we know what it's going to cost, we'll think of ways of finding that money either through the LAC, potentially, let's go through the LAC, or a combination with yourselves. Unfortunately, Parks and Countryside themselves don't have a budget for those signs, but I'm sure that we'll work together and get some new signs sorted out.
Oh, that's good news, thank you. Thank you. Well, presumably somebody will come back, Chair, will they?
Yes, of course. Yes, Councillor Hooper.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah. Reading your report, Rosemary, it says you've approached the North-East LAC. I don't think it's the North-East LAC. Or am I right or am I wrong?
It'll be my error. Was it South-East, Councillor Richards? Yes. Thank you for pointing that out.
I believe it's Central, but there you go.
East.
East? Well, I mean, first and foremost, if you're approaching the LAC, I think you need to approach the correct LAC. And if you haven't had a sufficient answer, I'm really surprised. Certainly other LACs I know throughout the city have supplied, and certainly with friends groups of parks, it's an ideal opportunity for LACs to fund. So I will go back to whichever LAC it is and knock on their door and say, can you use some of the funds? There has been some funds available, and each LAC, up to £5,000, the manager and the chair can actually allocate funds. That's provided the local councillors agree, but that's available. So I will go back and knock on their door, and it's an ideal opportunity. As the chair says, there's no ideal fund in there, but the LACs have. Also, there's sill money and all sorts of funding. You mentioned the ward pots. So I don't think it's difficult to fund 2 notice boards. And you shouldn't be running about like this trying to get that funding. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that advice, Alan. You wish to say something, Ruth?
I just wanted to come in and support Rosemary in this. I think what the problem was actually that she didn't have the actual costings to replace those things, so the approach to the LAC was rejected because they didn't know how much it might cost. Is it 50p? Is it £50,000? The notice boards and the signage at Norfolk Heritage Park, which do belong to Sheffield City Council, are actually bespoke to that park, so they're not standard signs. So that's why we need to get specific costs back. So we will support you in doing that. We're trying to get specific costs, and when we do, we'll feed that information back to the Friends of Norfolk Heritage Park and then work together to hopefully be able to get those funded as quickly as we possibly can to get them replaced, because they do need replacing. Some need replacing outright and some actually just need to be repainted, which we need to work together to do.
That's brilliant, thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. That's very
Yeah,
positive.
I'm not quite sure the format of questions, but
Again, I think even the costings, the LAC manager and the LAC chair should be able to do that with negotiations with Parks and get it back to you. I think that's the correct way. Am I right or am I wrong? Sorry.
It is actually in hand, as you say. It was about getting the costings.
It's getting the costing. I can't do that.
okay, let's move on to question
lovely.
3.
And the question 3. This is a long-standing issue, Chair, and it's we've been asking for the car park to be resurfaced, and we've had an inspection, and I don't know whether it's a matter of money or it's a matter of it's not been scheduled to be done, but as we leave that car park, the potholes are enormous and it's getting worse, and my concern is the members of the public use it, people with disabilities use it. We now have the staff from Moorfoot who moved up, and I know they're very good and they cycle where they can and use public transport. But it's not a car park anymore. It's just a series of great big potholes that fill with water. And we don't know where we are with are we getting it resurfaced, or we have no idea.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, again, Parks and Countryside have informed me that they are aware of the issues with the car park, probably because they see it most days they're there. And it has deteriorated significantly over the last few months as the park has been used more. They're going to request quotes for the work to repair and improve the surface. And once they've got those, they will update the Friends group and work together with you to try and see what can be done.
Thank you.
If I can just pop in here and say that we have agreed that between Arbethorne and Manor wards that we would use our local SIL money, but again it's about the costings and not knowing how much that'll be.
That makes sense. You can't commit to something unless you know what it's going to cost. Okay, slight error. You've only asked 4 questions, so can I have your 4th and final question, please?
Well, this has been brought up by one of our members on a number of occasions with us. And again, it's one where we can't move forward. It's a matter of self-set trees in Norfolk Park, and they're actually growing over the public path and into people's gardens. And the replies we're getting, and I have to thank our local councillor, Shonard Richards, for trying to take this one up. And the reply you get is, if a tree is overhanging your garden, you can lop off the branches. Well, if you see the trees, I think it would take a cherry picker. It really needs somebody to go down and investigate and give us a proper report before we have even more damage done.
Thank you. The tree team within Parks and Countryside survey trees and carry out any necessary remedial action as and when, safety being a key priority. We've asked that the team double check those specific trees and provide an update and reassurance for yourselves.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions, and I look forward to bumping into you in Stannington in due course.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Okay,
that completes. That's item 5, public questions and petitions. Item 6, members' questions. You've been very kind to me. There are no members' questions this time. Item 7 is the work programme. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm Rachel Appleyard, Principal Democratic Services Officer. So the work programme shows all the known substantive items for upcoming meetings of the committee. The changes to the work programme since the last meeting are highlighted in the table in part 1 of the report, which is on page 22. So there's 6 new items there. 1 item's been removed and then 1 item's been moved. Appendix 3, which starts at page 24, shows the items for the next few meetings of the committee. As this is the last meeting of the 2023-24 cycle, the dates for the 2024-25 cycle are going to be confirmed in May, but they've been provisionally sort of added to enable us to do some forward planning. And I'll hand over to officers to answer any specific questions on items. Thank you.
Do we have any questions regarding the work programme? No, fine. Yes. Councillor Richards.
Thank you. On page 21, it says a programme of visits, and then it says that the visit to libraries will be in 2023. Is that a typo, or is it that you've done it and won't be going again?
I don't actually know. We have had library visits. Perhaps Hilary could advise.
Hi. Yes, I think that reflects the visits that were undertaken. I'm going to struggle to remember the exact date now, but I think they were in the summer of 2023. So we did visits to some of our hub libraries, one of our volunteer libraries, and then later, I think it was around September, we did Central Library and the City Archives as well. So it would be kind of, I suppose, a rolling programme as well. We would pick different branches to go to, but that's been the programme so far. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would imagine that with the new membership for next year, if possible, then further visits will be organised. Thank you.
I think Councillor Hooper and myself would both recommend Ecclesfield Library as absolutely the fabbest of the voluntary libraries.
I'm afraid I would not necessarily agree with you. I think, although you could probably get 3 Stannington libraries inside your library, it's quality, not size, that is important. Thank you. Is there any other points or questions raised by the members? In that case, can I ask that we agree, and I will take silence as an agreement. Okay, thank you very much. We now move on to item 8, which is the formal decisions, and item 8 is the 2023-2024 quarter 3 budget monitoring. I invite Craig to come forward. Could you please introduce yourself for the benefit of people watching this?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me? Hi, I'm Craig Whelan. I'm the Senior Finance Manager and I'm deputising for Jane Wilby today. So I'm doing the Q3 budget update and outturn for you. So the paper gives an update on the quarter 3 budget monitoring information for 23-24 for the General Fund, the HRA and the Capital Programme. The collection fund and the treasury management outturn as well. The committee's last update was December on the quarter 2 outturn position. This is for quarter 3. Within quarter 3, the outturn is now £16.7 million budget deficit against a net revenue budget of £493 million, which represents a variance of 3.4%. In terms of movements from the last committee, which was Q2, it has improved by £700,000. We've seen a large adverse movement of £2.3 million in the Education, Children and Families Committee. This was due to increased forecast of placement costs and a risk around the income at our in-house provision, Alding House, plus a further demand of £0.5 million for home to transport for SEN pupils. these increases in overspends have been offset by additional income in adults, underspends against youth services, improvements in commercial property budgets, and further interest income from a strong cash position and good interest rates that we've got. Just in terms of background, we've got 3 key areas of overspend. These are adult social care, children's social care, and homelessness. In terms of adults, the service continues to be challenged by increasing demand and an inflating cost base through ongoing delivery of recovery plans and actions. Continuation of strength-based reviews, solid partnerships working with health and creative commissioning activities to reduce package costs. Within the children's committee, we have got huge challenges from the ballooning cost of placements caused by the limited supply in the city, alongside the shortage of foster carers to support the demand. We've also got rising costs of home to school transport provision. We're now supporting over 2,365 children, which has increased costs by almost 1,000 children in 4 years, so significant movement there. Homelessness, the situation has risen post-lockdown, and with a shortage of affordable housing in the city and a limited range of options, our use of hotel and B&B accommodation has reached unsustainable and unaffordable levels. The increase in the homelessness is a national issue. Households in temporary accommodation is currently at the highest level for 20 years. In spite of these emerging challenges, the £47 million worth of budget saving plans put in place as part of the 2023-24 budget is 77% to plan. And on track to deliver with a further 14% to be delivered next year in 24 and 25. There is, however, an underlying pressure of 28.5 million in our accounts, which needs to be addressed. One-off grant income offsets from provisions have been mitigated. Some sticky issues that need to be addressed in order to be sustainable going forwards. The majority of our issues span the 3 key areas, which are adults, children's and homelessness. In terms of the committee itself here, Parks, Leisure and Libraries, we're at 99% to budget on a £46.7 million budget for the full year, which I have to say is probably the closest to budget out of all the committees, so it's pretty good. We've got some variances up and down. Within libraries, we've got an under delivery of a BIP of 125k, but we've got an offset in terms of vacancy levels of about 0.3 million in that area. As it stands at Q3, the youth services forecast outturn is favourable by 567,000. I expect that to come down slightly as we go towards the year end, still to be favourable, but not to that extent. Within community services, it's forecast to overspend by 300k. The overspend in community services, excluding youth, relates to community support worker costs that were previously funded through clinically extreme vulnerable grant funding, which is no longer in place. And then in terms of parks and leisure services, the forecasting is combined overspend of 0.2 million. The majority of overspend is in parks and leisure due to coroner and medico-legal centre, which is a forecast overspend by 153k due to increased staffing and contractual costs. Can I just move on to a bit of national context now, which I think everybody's pretty well aware of, that the issues faced by Sheffield aren't unique. And councils across the country are experiencing some challenging moments around the financial context and management. The latest budget offered no solution from central government. The pressures we face, we'll have to take action, or at least at local level, to tackle some of the sticky issues that might come up. You may be well aware that last week we signed off a balanced budget for 24-25, which has been well received actually. So again, we need to be mindful as we're managing our money next year. I think one of the things I would say is that we've relied on reserves over the past few years, that we had 70 million in reserves set aside in 2021 for budget contingency and drawdowns. By the end of this year, that's £13 million. We have managed to find or draw an additional reserve of £12.5 million from a one-off surplus from our collection fund, so that takes the reserve that we've got up to £25.5 million. But as you can see, this year from £16.7 million deficit, there's only so many of those that we can breach before we kind of go into the red, really. Then I guess just to kind of in summary, we note that the overall budget deficit is 16.7 million for this year compared to previous outturn of 17.4, so a change of 0.7 million. So just kind of asking for committee members to note that position, and that's where we are.
Thank you very much. Do any members have any questions? I'll take Tony first.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the report. I want to look at 1.6.3, if I can. It says here the government does not fully subsidise all housing benefit payments made by the council, even though it sets the rules that determine the amount the council has to pay in 22-23. The council incurred a loss of 5.9 million as a result of legislation relating to this. Is that more than in years previous to that, or is it gone up that, you know, the amount that we have to contribute towards this?
So I'll have to take that one away because I don't have that information to hand, if that's okay, and refer.
Okay.
Back in.
Okay, thanks, Jeff.
I note that this committee has probably one of the smallest budgets, and compared to sort of education and adult services, it's always very vulnerable because so much stuff isn't as statutory as the others appear to be. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions on page 40 and 41. When it says for libraries, the shortfall will be mitigated by high vacancy rates this year. That's clearly disappointing because high vacancy rates, I assume, mean less customer care and less ability to run libraries, which, you know, if we need posts, then we need posts and we need staff. If we don't, then we need to look at whether it is possible to run and remove some of those posts. It says the next stage of redesign of library services needed. Can I ask when that's going to occur, and how much of this links to our report that we're going to have later on the agenda about library use, and whether we need to have the next report as a holding position while this review and redesign of library service is looked at. That's sort of my first question. And then on 1.7.6, when it says that the community support workers were previously funded through the clinically extremely vulnerable grant funding, which we no longer have, how are they now funded, or have they been abolished because the funding is no longer there? Does that make sense?
If I may, Hilary, the questions regarding libraries, will they be covered off in the other part of the meeting?
The one about the vacancy rate won't, but I'm perfectly happy to answer it now if that's helpful. So yeah, I fully recognise that when we have vacancies, we have posts because the posts are needed to run our service. The vacancies were there at the beginning of this year because we undertook quite a significant restructure. Part of implementing that to kind of make sure that our existing staff members weren't vulnerable to redundancy, because we put in apprentice roles and we put in new senior library assistant roles in each of our branches, meant that we were holding vacancies whilst that staff consultation concluded. A very difficult time for the service. We had agency support throughout that, which we don't obviously do as a matter of routine. From October last year, so 23, we had completed all of those recruitments. So since then, actually, we don't have a high vacancy rate there. Oh, sorry, I thought the microphone had stopped working there, apologies. We were seeing unplanned closures at lunchtimes within our libraries quite a lot of the weeks. We're not seeing that anywhere near as prevalently now. So absolutely, it was a kind of a period of time. We wouldn't routinely carry high vacancy rates because the posts are there, because actually our staffing levels and our customers need those roles in place.
Does that answer your question, Councillor? Ish. Okay. And your second question was about... Oh.
It was about funding, sorry. About the funding for community support workers now. The clinically extremely vulnerable grant funding is no longer there.
could you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, I will, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Lorraine Wood, Interim Director for Communities. Unfortunately, this statement is incorrect. The community support workers are not funded through the Clinically Extremely Vulnerable grant and never were. They are funded through the Better Care Fund. The overspend was by the team around the person, but we have now got funding to support that.
So is there still that overspend?
No, that overspend will be mitigated totally.
Thank you. Is it possible then to adjust the records?
I can adjust the records, yeah.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions for Craig? Well, in that case, thank you very much, Craig, for your report. And we shall now move on to item 9. Oh, no, we won't. We shall actually, there was a recommendation, which was that we note the updated information and management actions provided by this report on the revenue budget for Q3. Is that agreed?
Sorry, can we just make sure that that change that Lorraine has just explained to us is also put in the minutes so that we know
Yes, that will
really
be noted.
Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you. So that has been agreed. Thank you very much. Item 9 is a report on the antisocial behaviour policy. I'd like to invite the officers to come up and introduce yourselves and read your report.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Jim Dee, the Service Manager in the Antisocial Behaviour team, working in the Community Service for the Council.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Darryl Smedley. I'm Head of Service in Housing for Neighbourhood Intervention and Tenant Support.
Thank you, Committee. So the purpose of this report is to set out the work undertaken to review the Council's antisocial behaviour policy and to seek the approval of the committee of a revised version of the policy. Just give a bit of background information to the piece of work that we've been taking and before I get to the recommendation. We've obviously been reviewing the existing documentation as officers and with input from members of the committee and colleagues in the Housing Committee as well. The original document was written in 2016. There's been sort of minor sort of tweaks, if we say, along the way, but this is the first time in a little while that we've given a full-scale kind of revision of it and brought it to the committee to be adopted. There's a statutory requirement for the local housing authorities to have a published antisocial behaviour policy and procedure. And it's worth noting that this policy, if adopted, will stand as one which covers the whole council. But it also includes specifically references to where behaviour that's affecting and caused by council housing tenants. So it'll be a council policy, but it will cover the statutory duty to have a policy that covers the council housing service as well. And obviously we've been working closely with colleagues within the council housing service on this piece of work, and we've had valuable feedback from the housing committee as well in the development of this policy. We carried out a public consultation on the draft document, which I'll come to in a bit more detail shortly. Key elements of the policy are set out in the report. If I just say a few words to summarise that, they say things that I think we would expect us to say about our approach as a council, that we would take antisocial behaviour very seriously. will recognise the harm that it causes to individuals and communities. We work with partners to ensure that there's a joined-up response. We address a harm-focused and problem-solving approach to addressing and resolving the issues, and that we will take proportionate action using the full range of tools and powers available to us and based on the evidence. We're focused on finding the best outcomes for all involved. If I just move to talk briefly about the consultation exercise that we carried out as part of this piece of work. We carried out an extensive consultation throughout January to seek the public's views on the draft version of the policy. It was centred around the Council's Have Your Say platform, but was pushed out through various communications networks. But we also made sure that paper copies were available through housing offices and libraries, should people choose or not be able to complete the online survey. I'm pleased to say that there was a really good response to the consultation. We had a high number of responses, 854 responses, which is a large number, and a substantial proportion of those were council housing tenants as well. So bearing in mind what I said about the statutory duty and responsibility on the council housing service, I think we can say that there's been a good response from council tenants on this piece of work. There's obviously detailed analysis and discussion about the feedback on the survey in the report. I think it's a fair summary of the consultation to say that the large majority of people who responded supported the aims of the policy, but there was a strongly sort of expressed view by, I would say, a majority of respondents that they want to see it backed up by action, that the most important thing is that we do what we say in the policy, and I think certainly we would all agree with that. There were comments made about specific cases and experiences, which obviously weren't directly relating to the policy, but was valid feedback in terms of people's personal experience, and we're looking at that separately as a kind of separate piece of work, really. Whilst not directly relevant to the policy, it is nevertheless important feedback that we've had from our residents. Darren, is there anything more you wanted to say on that?
Yeah, thank you, Jim. I just wanted to touch on the high number of tenants that had responded to this, and we did take an opportunity to ask tenants a couple of additional questions, basically trying to test their understanding of, are they clear about what we do at Sheffield City Council? Is it clear to them? Are we clear about how we work with multi-agency partners, and we're clear about how that their responsibilities within their tenancy conditions? Because I think Jim's point about taking action is critically important for us, especially in the new world that we'll be coming into in 1st of April under the new regulator of social housing and the consumer standards. So listening to our tenants and taking action is vitally important. So we've picked up that additional that commentary that we're hearing from tenants, and we're feeding that into the Housing Repairs Improvement Plan, which is managed through the Housing Repairs Improvement Board, which is chaired by Ajman Ali, Exec Director of Neighbourhood Services, and feeds into the Housing Policies Committee. So we've really taken that opportunity to gather more evidence and tenant voice and layer that up with what we're already hearing from tenants. Because tenant satisfaction measures that have been introduced, one of them is, are you happy with the approach your provider is with tackling ASB? So it is really important to us and to tenants. So it's been a really fantastic piece of work, and I think, just to echo what Jim said, I think the way in which we've worked with yourselves, with the LACs, with libraries contributing, I think it's been a really good example across the council. Working together, we can get things done and move things forward.
Thank you, Darryl. It's also worth noting that we've received some really valuable feedback as part of the consultation process, some really, really interesting points that we hadn't previously considered, and some really valuable feedback. That's set out in section 3.3 of the report, the changes that we made to the draft policy on the back of the feedback. I'll just highlight a couple of the key points. We expanded the section on partnership working. The original draft that went out to consultation was a very, very brief section. We had quite a lot of feedback that said they didn't really understand what we meant by partnership working and how we would work in partnership. So that may be an example. It's an example of why we need to consult on things, and maybe something that we took for granted as officers. So you'll see in the new version, the version that's attached to the report, there's a much longer section on partnership working. Further clarification on what we mean by harm-centred approach. That's some language that we use within the document, and a few people had said they didn't really understand what we meant by that, or we needed to explain it further, which hopefully we have done in the document. And we also amended the sections where we talk about what we may and may not consider to be antisocial behaviour. There was some really interesting feedback on that as well, and some quite strong views expressed, and we've managed to change that section on the basis of that feedback as well. So overall, we're confident that we've developed a comprehensive policy that sets out the robust action that Council will take with our partners to address the harm and the misery caused to individuals and communities by antisocial behaviour. The policy will underpin the work programmes of the relevant council services to ensure that we keep the communities of Sheffield safe, and that expands on what Daryl and myself have said about the work that we will do over the coming months and years in relation to the service that we provide on the back of our policy, if it's adopted. So that leads to the recommendations. So it's recommended that the Communities, Parks and Leisure Committee, Policy Committee, first of all, approves the antisocial behaviour policy attached to the report as a statement of the Council's approach to tackling antisocial behaviour. And secondly, linked to that it grants delegated authority to the Director of Communities to finalise and agree the design and format of the antisocial behaviour policy document before publication, and where necessary to make any minor amendments and updates to the policy required in order to reflect any organisational or legislative changes which take place prior to it being formally reviewed by this committee. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for your report. A number of members have already indicated to speak. Is that Councillor Richards? Do you want to ask a question? Okay, I'll add you to my list, but I'll start with Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that. This is a really good statement of the Council's approach to tackling ASB, and I think the feedback suggests it's easy to understand, which is really positive, and you've got good engagement, particularly from council tenants, so that's good to see. I mean, this might follow in the set of procedures, but I think as councillors, it's useful for us to know, this is what people will ask us, how do they contact the council about ASB? And I mean, I've looked at the link, and it still is quite confusing. It talks about whether you're a council tenant, it talks about the police. I just wondered, is there a plan for having like a single point of contact, like an online form or an app or something that's easy to use?
So I can't commit that there'll be a plan for a single point of contact, but what there will be, and this links to, again, something that Daryl said about the work going forward, about reviewing how easy it is to make reports to the council, where the report should go, what types of reports should go, and to make sure that we've got good information available to people. In terms of the policy itself, it was important to not have that level of detail in a policy. What we've tried to do instead is have the statement that talks about, the important point is it shouldn't matter where it's reported, it's about how easy it is to report and that it gets to the right people and the right service when it is reported. So we've tried to, for the policy itself, we've tried to keep it at that level, but sitting behind that needs to be good information on the website, for example, and the kind of mechanisms of how people can report.
Yeah, I can just quickly update on what we're doing in housing, but again, I would say what this has done as a piece of work is has brought the teams closer together. So the internal council lines have been broken down, which is critically important for tenants and residents across the city. We know that what's on the website is not as accessible as it could be. We've got some resource that we'll be looking at that, what our digital offer is. And I think, as Jim said, is what's most important is that when you're a customer coming into the council, it's that you get to the right people who can support you and help you, and that's really is the most important part. So that will be part of our approach going forward as well, looking at that. and I think just continuing to take on board what we're hearing from tenants about how easily accessible it is really important. So it's a really welcomed question.
Thank you. Yes, it's a good statement of intent in that respect. Can I just ask a question as well, more about the specifics? So regarding the comments that you've received about what's regarded as potential ASB behaviours and what isn't, so at page 58 and 59, so there's 3 comments there about parking, and like 2 of them have got particular reference to the issue of inconsiderate parking, creating barriers, particularly for disabled people. And then at page 71, it does suggest that there is now a reference to vehicles, like quad bikes, and I think that's following consultation, isn't it? But it's a shame it hasn't gone further to actually include antisocial parking, and I just wondered what the rationale is behind that.
So we, on one of the original drafts, we included parking as something that generally we wouldn't consider to be antisocial behaviour, but I think based on the feedback, and you've just given examples there of where actually in some cases it can be antisocial behaviour, and certainly something that can affect people and needs to be addressed. So through one of the things that so as a starting point, we took it out of that list of things that we may regard not being antisocial behaviour, but we didn't feel those lists aren't intended to be kind of comprehensive. They're illustrative rather than kind of comprehensive. So we felt that it wasn't something that needed to be kind of added to the list of things that, you know, we usually would regard as antisocial behaviour, but it certainly needed to be taken off the list of things that we generally wouldn't.
Yeah, I think from the policy perspective, I think it's right that it's not in there. I think what's critically important is that how we work with street scene and regulation and the right services who've already got the responsibilities to deal with some of those issues that we see. So again, it comes back to how we're accessing those services and trying to take forward some of those issues, especially I'm thinking what we're seeing on multi-tenure estates. So we'll be seeing themes, you'll all know that as councillors, what you're hearing and seeing. So it's how we then pushing that back into other services so they can support people to live better in their neighbourhoods.
Okay, thanks. I mean, I think it's a missed opportunity really to be a bit bolder about that. But I mean, the misuse of road vehicles, could that be included potentially?
Potentially, yeah. And that was a separate issue that was, again, came through quite a lot of respondents, that they felt that we didn't refer to vehicles, I think, at all in one of the earlier drafts, and actually there are lots of issues involving vehicles that do affect communities and these antisocial behaviours. So that's the reason we updated the version based on feedback in that way.
So there is scope for it. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. Next member is Councillor Downing.
Thank you, Jim and Darryl. Yeah, I want to raise an issue about antisocial behaviour in council properties. Obviously, I know we cannot vet people before they go in, but I welcome the introductory tenancies that we're dealing with, and that might sort of ease some of the situation. I sometimes think that we don't have the wraparound service for vulnerable tenants when they take on a property. You used to have the Housing Plus. I don't know if that's still operational, but I certainly see in every day in my ward that there are issues, and it's the wraparound service for vulnerable tenants that needs to be addressed, and I don't think we are doing that. And these are the people that I feel sorry for, to some degree, because they're not behaving properly. They're causing problems for other tenants in the area, and if they had that wraparound service where they get a visit more often, that might help the situation there. I just wondered what your views are on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's all really good points on that. Like you say, we have now got the introductory tenancy model in place, which within that we've got a closer relationship with that tenant when they're a new tenant in that new home. So that's already, we're seeing some benefits from that. So part of my service is the income management and financial inclusion team. So we're already seeing, for example, that accounts are in credit rather than starting to accrue arrears. Obviously, the tenancy enforcement and sustainment team, which deal with enforcement on that as well. So we're already seeing those behaviours that we would like to see and support tenants with. So that's our support model around them. What's important is that that just doesn't drop away after the 1 year and then they become a secure tenant. So what's really important, which is what I think you described there, is that neighbourhood management model and really looking at that to make sure that it's fit for purpose, because as we know that some tenants will need more support than others, and that's really important. So I think again it's how we take that away and think about how we look at our services moving forward to ensure that they provide the right level of support for tenants. And that doesn't mean that it's always equal. So it's about that proportionality and what people need. And again, I think it comes back to the point I made earlier, is it's about us being more open across the organisation and taking opportunities, looking at the referrals. So we're all in the same directorate. I think Lorraine talked earlier about team around the person. It's how we accessing all of the services within there, so that we've got a person-centred approach to this, which ultimately will allow people to live better and well in their homes. Because we know that these type of behaviours do have a big impact in the neighbourhoods, which is also, we can't accept that.
Thank you. Councillor McGowan.
Leads on nicely actually, because my question was about team around the person and where that links into this, because I've just had a case myself. We had a presentation and it absolutely blew me away what Zanya and the team do there. Obviously we've got to be careful because they're only a small team and managing that, but it was just, where does that fit in? Because there's no, as far as I could see, there was no mention of it. Under vulnerable, I looked it up and now I can't find pages, but I did circle it where you said about vulnerable people. It doesn't mention it. But it's also, my other question is about our officers knowing about TAP, because I was dealing with a resident contacted me about their neighbour that's a council tenant, and they actually felt the abuse that they were getting, but they actually felt sorry for the tenant and was concerned about mental health, etc. Put it in, but it was for me, I ended up putting it through to Zanya's team, not the housing officer that did it, that had been dealing with it. And they were full of praise for them and the police, but nobody was picking it up as that. So it's just about how we get those messages out to our housing staff to use that. And just one other question was about, moving on from what Marianne said. Anne-Marie, sorry, I can't read.
Marianne.
Right, okay, yeah, sorry. Grass verges, you know, and parking on grass verges. This is council housing land that we're talking about, and some of our estates look absolutely appalling, especially at this time of year. So if we're looking about the old antisocial behaviour and lifting up the community and everything, when we don't take any action on it or give them solutions, and to me it's all about solutions. Not every grass verge is ideal for a tree, not every grass verge is ideal for a planter, but there must be 3 or 4 different options, and I'm not saying council always pay for it, but we could give residents and tenants options. But anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just give a brief, because I appreciate Lorraine's probably wanted to answer the question on the tap, but I'll just, from a housing perspective, as I've mentioned, we have got a housing improvement action plan, and one of the actions on there, which I'm actually responsible is our improving our approach to working with partners, including internal partners, and within that, so already we've started from the central team working more closely with the neighbourhood teams to reset expectations and training, so that we're enabling them to be more confident and competent in what they're doing, because this is not easy. You know, like I think what you've just explained there, that were a really perfect example. This is not easy stuff, and we can't just assume that because someone had some introductory training a number of years ago, that they feel confident in this space, because actually neighbourhood officers are responsible for a whole host of things, and ASB is one of them. So actually it's really important that we are thinking about that professionalisation agenda, which is hot on the press at the moment, but thinking about what that looks like internally. So we've already started some really good work in that space. So part of that is that looking at things like how do we refer into that? What's happening behind that door? Is it just ASB or is it something else? So it's having that professional curiosity to be thinking about the other types of things that could be happening in a home, so that we're not missing opportunities, and I think that's what's really important. And I think it's important that as leaders and managers we're modelling those behaviours and actually demonstrating how we work together, and continually signposting and making sure that we've got, you know, line management structures in place so that we don't miss those opportunities to refer into TAP, refer into GIBS, you know, safer neighbourhoods, so that we're trying to resolve those issues.
It's knowing when to as well.
Yeah.
You know, when do they pass it on, when they've done their bit? What's the line of?
Yeah.
Sorry. What's the line of when they've done everything they can do as an officer and it needs to go escalate somewhere else?
Yeah. What we've done as well is just recently is because we've got a new management team in that area, in that team as well. So we've reset the central to neighbourhood model management team. So they now have weekly meetings with ward team leaders to discuss specific cases. So you've not got slippages on cases, or if you need to ask for advice and support on a case, it's more regular. So that's part of our improvement journey, which is including all our performance improvement plans.
Thanks, Darryl. I don't think I've got much to add there, actually, because you've covered it very succinctly. I think it is just about raising that awareness around the team, around the person, but the community support workers as well. Actually, the first call is the referral into the community support workers, because they work in that way. They work as a key worker and hold the team that should be around that person, and that could include a neighbourhood officer, that could include a PSPO, that could include a district nurse or a mental health worker, and they hold the ring. The team around the person is a meeting where we need to escalate things, and in certain cases pull everybody together if the partnerships are not working around an area or a person. So I think you covered that really well. Thanks, Darryl.
Okay, thank you. I'm getting conscious of time. We've got 3 more members who indicated they'd like to ask questions or make comments. So I'll take Councillor Petitions.
Right. Anybody who's ever had me in their committee will know that their committee does go on a bit because I go on a bit, but it is actually because I care and want to make sure we look at this thoroughly. Antisocial behaviour has absolutely been such a key, big issue in my ward, Manor Castle, for the last several years, as one of my residents who is sitting here, disguised as a councillor, will tell you. And it ranges from, during the snowy weather, we had masked gangs stealing our bins and taking them onto manor fields to burn them. We've had pigeon lofts burned. We've had a real issue around the steel steps area of the ward of drug taking, loud music, intimidation, only a couple of stabbings, and a turf warfare incident at 4 one afternoon. And antisocial behaviour doesn't sound as serious as I think it is in terms of making people's lives a misery. But what I've noticed about these reports is that they don't actually mention counsellors, and it's one of our biggest things as councillors is we get complaints from residents about antisocial behaviour, but what there isn't in any of this is a bit like Marianne said about needing a single phone number. There isn't anywhere that says to us as councillors how we get in and what our role as councillors is in this, because our communities do expect an enormous amount from the councillors, and we take it very seriously, but can't always get through some of the bureaucracy of the council to get things done. So I'm just going to go through and look at, for instance, on page 52, 4.2.1, there are no financial implications of approving the ASB policy. Well, surely there ought to be, because if we're tackling it seriously, then there have to be finances involved to make sure things happen. And it just sounds like this is just a policy that will have no, what's what I'm looking for? We'll have this policy, but it won't mean anything. So that was just something that worried me. Page 71, when we're on the actual policy now, I got sent a video of motorbikes on Norfolk Park only this week, and what was interesting was me wading in and saying this is a disgrace, and people coming back and saying, oh, they're just young people having a bit of fun, what does it matter? And you say, well, parks are for quiet enjoyment and for people to be able to walk around safely with their kids, and they're saying, oh, but it doesn't really matter, it doesn't cost anything. And you think of all the turf being drubbed up and what is going to happen, parks having to resort and reseed and things. But also on page 71, it says reasonable household noise. And yeah, vacuuming. My friend famously used to use vacuuming to get her baby to sleep. On the other hand, if somebody's vacuuming at 3 in the morning and you're in a flat above them, that isn't reasonable. So it's going to depend on the timings, isn't it, of those noises, and when your neighbours are doing them. And in the same way, when it says on page 72, carrying out DIY at reasonable times and for reasonable durations, I actually think we need times on that and what is reasonable, because somebody doing their DIY at 11 at night isn't reasonable in my mind, but somebody else might say, oh, well, I'm actually, it's just before I go to work in the evening and it's fine for me. So I think there is actually, for building, or in building regs, there's a thing about what the reasonable times for builders to be doing work, and I think that we should have a similar timetable for people carrying out DIY at home. And then the ball games bit, yeah, children aren't meaning to be antisocial, but if somebody is kicking a ball against your wall, which is your and end terrace house, then after that's gone on for 20 minutes, thud, 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 that is definitely something you would consider to be antisocial and irritating, to say the least. Whereas kids playing a ball game and asking for their ball back 20 times is irritating in a different way, but one that you will accept. On page 73, again, the roles and responsibilities, it would be incredibly useful to have one side of A4 for councillors to tell them what all these things are, who they go to and what they can do, because the last thing you want as a councillor when people come to you is not to know what happens. On environmental protection services, out of hours is particularly something like noise. I believe we no longer have an out of hours service at the weekends, when noise actually tends to be something that really irritates people when they're trying to rest. So can we ask what our out of hours services are regarding that, and who you would contact if you've got an out of hours ASB complaint from people? On page 74, support for vulnerable perpetrators, I completely get that, but we can't allow that to override support for victims who have vulnerable perpetrators perpetrating ASB. I think I had a case where somebody was playing very loud music at 3 in the morning, and they were saying, oh, but it's their mental health, that's how they soothe themselves. But the person in the flat above was a care worker who had to leave for work at 5 in the morning, and it absolutely ruined and wrecked their life, and they ended up having a heart attack from the stress of it. So I think the checks and balances around there, we have to be quite careful. Page 75, mediation. Who does mediation and is it enforceable? And then page 77, measuring performance. It would be very useful for councillors to be able to measure performance about antisocial behaviour in their wards and how it's been tackled. And then I think on ASB case reviews, the community trigger, which always makes me think of Roy Rogers. You've got the threshold, yeah, I know, I'm old. The threshold for antisocial behaviour case reviews is 3 separate incidents about the same antisocial behaviour within the last 6 months. But it doesn't say you could have 3 separate incidents, but 3 different people reporting it in different ways. But it's affected a number of people. And it appears that only one person at a time can make that complaint. We had an antisocial case review, as you know, about the whole steel steps issue. We had an independent person from ASB Help come to chair it. And to be honest, I think the residents and we, the councillors, felt it hadn't been a helpful review, in as much as at one point when we asked for the results of the review, the chair assured us that as councillors, we shouldn't even have been allowed into the room, and we certainly wouldn't be given the results of the proposals, which, considering as councillors we'd worked so hard on that case, being told that we weren't relevant to it was, well, it was not just a snub, but it felt like a complete slap to say that as councillors representing people in the area, you're not an interested party, when so clearly we were. And sort of just finally, sorry, I know I've rabbited on, Chair, is the bit about how you join the things together, because we as councillors are running around trying to get different bits of the council to listen to us. So it's like transport, because we're concerned about trying to get a road closure. It's trying to keep contact with the police to find out what the police are still doing about the antisocial behaviour. It's about whether an antisocial behaviour review, once you've done it, you actually take up the recommendations, or whether that has to be done by somebody else. It just feels that it isn't quite joined up enough, that councillors end up doing a lot of chasing, and that despite saying, well, this was a recommendation from an antisocial behaviour review, the officers aren't terribly interested in it because it doesn't impinge on their own service in the same way, such that I think great policy, but it does feel that it doesn't work in practice. And I just want to make sure that it does, because it's such a blight for our local residents. And Paul.
Thank you very much, Councillor Richards. I think you made a number of very valid comments. I'll ask the officers to respond.
Thank you. Yes, some really important points there, and I think you gave some very real examples there of why a policy such as this is so important, because of the issues that do affect communities and blight people's lives. So I think in terms of some of the specifics there, it's probably not a good idea to go into the detail about specific issues, other than to recognise that those are the things that sit behind the importance of having a policy like this. I think broadly one of the things to say in response to a few of the points you've made there is that this document is almost a starting point. It's a policy document that sets out the things that we should be doing. There's a lot of information that needs to sit behind this. We had an example earlier from Councillor Elliott about the importance of having information on how to report. You've also given some really good examples there of why there needs to be associated procedural documents, guidance documents that sets out in more detail how things actually happen. And that can include things such as the role of elected members and how we work and the importance of working with elected members in some of the situations you've described there. Some of the specific questions you've asked, apologies if I don't get to them all, but I think we can cover them. I think a broad one, you talked about a specific example there of community, ASB case review, or also known as community trigger. There are other forums where those things can be discussed as a community and where local elected members are involved, such as the community action groups, and that's where action plans can be agreed on specific issues and the problem solving, and making sure that the right services are involved. And even if it doesn't appear that services are doing what they should be doing, that's a way of making sure ensure that it does. So I think that's an example of how that should happen and how that would follow on sometimes from an ASB case review. Mediation, you asked, is it enforceable? On the whole, mediation isn't enforceable, and it would kind of work against the aims of a mediation process if it was, but it's something that needs to be available as an option in certain circumstances, depending on the issue that's being dealt with. And I think that's one of the things broadly this policy tries to set out, that, and again, you gave some really good examples there of some of the where noise might affect certain people at some times and not others, or it might affect the same sort of timing might affect some people and not other people. So that's the overall purpose of this document, is to try and set out that actually we do look at things on an individual basis and based on the circumstances of how it's affecting somebody, what's happening, what evidence is available. So whilst we use illustrative examples in here, they're not kind of a comprehensive, if it's this, we'll deal with something, if it's this, we won't, kind of thing. There's a lot of detail that needs to sit behind that to explain perhaps in more detail some of the issues that you've raised.
So is there an out of hours noise service, and who does that?
My apologies, I don't have a full answer to the current situation with the out of hours noise service. It's managed by the Environmental Protection Service, so I'd have to take that away to find the definitive current answer. My apologies that I don't have that here, unless any of my colleagues. No, we'll take that away, sorry.
Okay, can we make sure that all members get an answer to that?
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. In that case, I have Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Chair,
Take your mic off, please, Jim.
It's a comprehensive report about antisocial behaviour, but mainly around housing needs. I would like a definition of antisocial behaviour, because it's from one person to another, it's a different thing. Councillor Richards mentioned various things about, there's nothing much in here about councillors being involved, and in page 73 about roles and responsibilities. To me, there's quite a few of our partners that are missing off there, parks and other people where antisocial behaviour takes place. We've just recently introduced the CAGs, Community Action Groups, and I think that's the place where a lot of this needs to go. It either needs to come to this committee, the likes and the CAGs. We had ours last week, the first one, quite successful, but not all the partners were there. We need to ensure that the partners come along. And get things. We did have housing, which was really productive. And as Councillor Richards said, I think we as councillors need a list of people we can contact. We battered from pillar to post, I think, trying to find reasonable contacts. But to me, it's what is antisocial behaviour, and the grass verges is one. The parking in certain instances, parking around schools, is that antisocial behaviour? I think in some cases it is, because it's causing people lots of problems. So where are these addressed? And hopefully our CAGs, when we get them moving, we will have actions and they will continue until the antisocial behaviour is resolved. That's the North Line, we will do that. But we do need the partners to attend. Certainly we were reasonably well attended, but unfortunately the police weren't there, other commitments, and people like Parks. We need everybody on board at our meetings so we can actually get all the partners together and thrash antisocial behaviour in a particular area and really crack it. If housing are there and that's all, that's not good enough because we need all the partners there, but it's something to take away. And I don't know whether we take it back to this committee or we move it on to the LACs and LAC chairs meeting where we can probably make the CAGs effective. If that's set up effective, I believe we can make a big difference in our communities with antisocial behaviour. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. I think you agree, I totally agree with you, that we need to drive this policy forward through the CAGs with guidance and procedures that Jim's spoken about. You're absolutely right, because those community action groups are the right place for it, but you do need the partners there, and I'll escalate that, and I'll speak to each LAC manager and find out which partners aren't attending and should be attending.
I think it's early days, and I think, you know, they will get the message. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hawkshaw.
Thank you. I feel like we could be a bit more ambitious in what we're doing here. I'm getting a kind of sense of what we can't do rather than what we could do. I get that feeling as we're going along. And in that respect, I was going to raise about the specifics we've got on page 58 and 59, which I think quite could, if people would like to have a look at those. Most of 58 and half of 59. And I think they're very helpful in what they say to us and what people say to us as well. So what I would suggest in moving from policy, which we're talking about now, into the operation, that we make use of those. Because I think they've been quite well worked up into case studies or frequently asked questions that may help us to resolve some of those things that, is that antisocial behaviour, is that not? Who does that go to? Who does that not go to? So it's almost like that, I don't know whether it would be in a kind of a form of a list or a grid or in some way to make that easily communicable to ordinary folks. And on that, I'd like to say that actually we've got up to 20% of Sheffield's population does not have regular access to the internet. So when we do put this together, yes, we need a social media policy. Yes, we need to be internet friendly and digital, but we also need a mechanism by which we talk to ordinary folks and give them an opportunity to feed in to this, but also to be able to reply by telephone and have a real person at the other end.
Thank you. I think there's some really good points made there. So thank you for that. In terms of the what we do with the feedback that comes from that, that's included in the report, absolutely agree with you. We can use that, and I think Darryl explained earlier some of the ways in which that we're going to do that and sort of use that as learning about the service. But I think it's also a really interesting idea to perhaps use it as case studies as well in terms of how we take this forward. I'm not sure that that's something we've considered so far, so that's a really helpful suggestion. Thank you.
They are anonymised anyway, aren't they? So you know, you've got that basis for that.
And they're real. They're based on what people have said. In terms of the point about it being available digitally and needing to make sure that there are alternatives to that, absolutely agree with that. And that's something that if this policy is agreed, obviously the next stage is to look at how we best get that out, communicate it to people, ensure that people are aware of it. We often talk about how the purpose of this policy is for people to use it against us if we're getting it wrong. It's about holding us to account, so we need to make sure people are aware of it and that it's not just available online.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Rice.
It's taken a little bit of time to get around to me, but on the issue of pavement parking, I believe that consultation was recently concluded, relatively recently, concluded with there planning to be legislation or legislative process to extend the ban of pavement parking outside of London and giving local authorities the opportunity to implement that at their own discretion nationwide.
Thank you. Finally, Councillor...
Would you want to keep it brief?
Finally, Councillor Weatherall.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've just got to echo what colleagues have said around the table. I think it's a good report and it's a good start, Lorraine. It really is. I can see this working out. It's a shame there's no budget to it, but easy access, I think, is through council as well. What's been mentioned. But I've just got to pick up on a couple of points. What Alan said as well. The LACs have been let down by all departments. They're just not turning up. When LACs were set up, we were going to have all departments turning up on a regular basis. You know, even if the alternative, I'd go for that. But they're just not. You know what I mean? So I thank you for what you've said earlier, and you'll look into it. I know you will. About getting them there, finding out from your officers. And that side, schools as well, you know, parking, that is antisocial behaviour. You know, we've got to educate people more, you know, and we've got to, if they want fining, well, that's a way down to, you know, that's a way to do it. And our estates, and I know Karen has mentioned it, quite a few other colleagues have mentioned about parking on grass, and our estates are really looking a bit tired, you know, about grass and everything. But what really gets my goat is, the antisocial behaviour is, we've got policies in this council, repair services got them, housing, grounds maintenance people's got them. This last few months, I've sent to beyond one, and my wife says, we're not stopping again, are we? I have to pull up and take a photo. Are our vehicles churning up the grass verges? And Amy and all that. And I've been onto it, and it's a constant battle. And they've all been told that, you know, we have got a policy, so if we're telling members of the public not to do it, you know, when you've got a van what's got Sheffield City Council plastered all over it, we shouldn't be doing it either. So if you just take that on board and pass that on. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Weatherall. We certainly will pass that on for you. And just going back to the parking around schools, I believe our South East LAC, our colleagues in the South East LAC, had a really good scheme working with children in the local schools there to actually find their parents if they were parking inappropriately. So I think this could be considered and looked at for all LACs, because it was a really good scheme and the children thoroughly enjoyed being part of that. And I don't know if you want to add anything, Karen, because the awards ceremony was brilliant. Yes, Tony, you're right.
Yeah, I'll just say there's no one quick fix for parking around schools, because every road and every school's in a different location, have all got issues. But I do believe there's I'll call it a toolbox of different things that you can try and do. And the good bad parking scheme is just part of it. But then the children being educated on good bad, because they're our future drivers and everything. And then coming out and putting tickets on their parents' cars, but saying that well done for being a good parking considerate, like, and not for others, was really good. And then we used the LACs to give them certificates, and the head teacher came along with the young people, and we handed certificates out to them that had been involved. So I think, yeah, it's a future thing as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think this is the first time this year that every member has spoken on an issue. So congratulations, you've saved it all up to the end. But I think it also seriously reflects how detrimental to life antisocial behaviour can be. It's a good report, as you said, it's a good start. My observation would be that we don't leave it another 8 years, I've calculated. Did you say 2016?
The first version was written in 2016.
Yeah.
It's been...
So my maths tells me,
yeah.
Let's not leave it 8 years to have another look at it. In fact, I would recommend to whoever in the committee that we have another look at it next year, just to see if some of the concerns and observations that have been made today have actually come to fruition and what needs to change. So that would be my recommendation to. Yes.
Thank you. I just thought, reflecting on the fact that we do seem to have sort of cross-party consensus that there is an omission here in that we haven't included antisocial parking. I mean, is it possible to suggest a minor amendment to add that on?
Well, I'm actually looking at the recommendation. It does actually say that the Director of Communities does have delegated powers. Could we, is it apt to ask the Director of Communities to have a look at that? And if they, sorry, Councillor Downing.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, we had issues with this, especially on housing estates, where a road is less than 7.5 metres wide, and I'm talking mainly about pavement parking, of course, but there's sometimes it's grass verges, but where a road is less than 7.5 metres wide, if a car is parked fully on the road, each side of the road, if a fire engine or a large vehicle would not be able to get up in an emergency, that's the only issue. I think on a road that's above 7.5 metres wide, then there is no excuse. Thank you, Chair.
Hang on, Robert's going to give an opinion.
Hi, Robert Parkin, Assistant Director Legal. So that delegation is designed to reflect organisational and legislative changes rather than be a gateway to additional policy. But I think if the committee wants to resolve to commission the team to go away and look at this, then that's open to the committee. I think just as an aside, it would seem that there might be a number of impacts of such a policy, including on the council's transport and highways and traffic management functions. So those would probably need to form part of considerations, and perhaps then it could be brought back to committee as an addendum to the policy or an update.
Yeah, I would say, before I take anybody else, I would say that sounds like a very good suggestion and workable, because there's always unintended consequences of what could potentially be a very sound idea. So it needs a bit more consideration. Very briefly, Councillor McGowan.
I was just going to propose a working group with the Transport Committee members and try and hammer this out and get some agreement between us both. If it impacts on them and impacts on us, can we get something together?
Again, and Councillor, sure.
I'm thinking if it's a delegated power, if we could just make a recommendation that they investigate this more thoroughly. I'm not sure it needs a task and finish group. I was prepared to second what Councillor Elliott said.
Is that a formal proposal then? Or is it something that you would like the officers to have a look at?
Chair.
Yes, Councillor Hooper.
Yeah, I think the suggestion has been made that really it's not down to us, it's down to transport. Suggesting another working group, we've got far too much on this committee to deal with what we've got, so another working group is just too much. I think we've digressed from the actual recommendation into parking issues. It's not for this committee, Chair. Thank you.
I'll just take the officers, if I may.
If I could just make a suggestion, what we're really talking about here in terms of the policy is the examples of what may and may not be, the sort of illustrative examples of what may or may not be considered to be antisocial behaviour based on the circumstances that we're investigating. We've so far decided not to include parking as one of the examples we put in here, but that wouldn't mean that we wouldn't necessarily deal with an issue as it was reported to us. So in terms of it's a matter for the committee, and I think we might need Robert's advice on what we can do here, but we could add something along the lines of antisocial parking, re-add it, if you like, to the list of examples without kind of, what it's doing is saying that it will be dealt with if it fits in with the, you know, the stated aims of the policy.
Yeah, well, obviously, Chair, sorry if you're happy for me to speak. I would defer to the officers on the interpretation of the policy. If they consider that listing antisocial parking fits within, as you described, Jim, the wider objectives of the policy, I'd defer to you because you're the ones that are going to be working with the policy. But if on the basis of that, Chair, that the committee are comfortable, then it seems to me up to the committee to adopt it.
It's, sorry, if we were to add it there as an example, that's not committing that officers would deal with every single complaint of parking. Because there are other services concerned with parking offences, and you know what we're talking about here is use of antisocial behaviour policy, antisocial behaviour powers, and indeed tenancy conditions in this context. So it would only be where it was relevant in that context. That's the key issue here. I think we need to be careful about, as others have said, sort of making certain commitments under an antisocial behaviour policy that might be at odds with other legislative frameworks and powers within the council. But in terms of using it as an illustrative example, we've heard examples this afternoon of where it can be antisocial.
I think that's a very good suggestion, to use it as an illustrative example, and it's there for people to see. So if we're generally happy with that, then we'll move to the recommendation. It is recommended that the Community Parks and Leisure Policy Committee firstly approves the antisocial behaviour policy attached to this report as a statement of the Council's approach to tackling antisocial behaviour, and grants delegated authority to the Director of Communities to finalise and agree the design and format of the antisocial behaviour policy document before publication, and where necessary to make any minor amendments and updates to the policy required in order to reflect any organisational or legislative changes which take place prior to the policy being formally reviewed by the Community Parks and Leisure Policy Committee. Are we in agreement with that?
Sorry, Chair, are we going to add something in? Because I think we've established that parking is in scope, so can we add to the recommendations that it's included in the list of examples?
So, yeah, perhaps the third part of the recommendation is requests that officers list antisocial parking, or is it antisocial parking, along in the list of illustrative examples of antisocial. Well, Lorraine's going to help us out, I think, with better wording than that.
There is already a bullet point that says antisocial use of vehicles, which will include antisocial parking. So we could just add it to that bullet point quite easily and reflect it. Is that okay?
On that basis, is that agreed? Okay, that's been unanimously agreed. Thank you very much. And thank you for the debate. Count it to 10 and go again. Right, item 10. This is a proposal for a one-year extension to the Parks grant to the Green Estate. And I'm afraid I can't let you ask questions for an hour on this, otherwise we'll be here till 10 o'clock tonight. But to take your point, Councillor Richards, ABS is a very serious issue, and I was more than happy for you to make your points. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I will. I don't think I did earlier. I'm Ruth Bell. I'm Head of Parks and Countryside. So, as you mentioned, I'm here for a couple of items, but the first one is the proposal for a one-year extension of Parks funding to Green Estate. I'm not proposing to read through the report because I know that you've all had it and you will have read it, but I'll just go through some key points if that's okay. So as per the report, Strategy and Resources Committee approved a grant to Green Estate on the 5th of December 22 that took us through to the 31st of March 2024, and we're now seeking approval to extend this arrangement for 12 months. That is from the 1st of April 2024 to the 31st of March 2025, for an amount of £141,481. for those that don't know, Green Estate have managed the Manor site for over 15 years, and they've developed the parkland into a green space for the benefit of local people. The site, I think Councillor Richards would agree, it feels safe, accessible and welcoming, which it didn't always. The site is managed to Green Flag standard, which obviously is the highest standard that we have in the city. And it's the ask of this report that the existing funding arrangements that we have with Green Estate are renewed for that 1 year period, as I mentioned, granting them £141,481, subject to a subsidy control assessment and then subsequent approval from the Executive Director of Neighbourhood Services. During that 1 year period, while we maintain the existing arrangements, Parks and Countryside will undertake a review to allow us to develop a plan to enable a longer term arrangement for the Manor Fields and associated sites. The wording is really formal, so I'm just going to read direct the recommendation from the report, if that's okay. So apologies, I've got my eyes on my screen. The Communities, Parks and Leisure Policy Committee is recommended to improve, in principle, the extension of existing funding arrangements by 12 months with Green Estate, with a further £141,481 being granted to Green Estate for their management and maintenance of Manor Fields and associated sites excuse me, for 24-25, and it delegates approval of the extension of existing funding arrangements and award of those monies to the Executive Director of Neighbourhood Services. Such approval is to be subject to the prior completion of a subsidy control principles assessment to demonstrate the reasonable satisfaction of the Executive Director of Neighbourhood Services that the extension of the funding agreements and award of those monies is compliant with the subsidy control principles. Sorry, that's incredibly wordy.
Thank you very much. Before we go to that recommendation, do any members have any questions or comments? I'll start with Councillor Richards.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, this park is in my ward, and it is magnificent. And anybody going up City Road and thinking, my goodness, I'm in the inner city, just needs to pause, just past the big shop, go into the park, and you will think that you're in the middle of the countryside. It is fabulous, and it is incredibly well managed. I would just like to ask that when the reassessment and renewing arrangements are being done, that my colleagues who are the councillors for the ward will also be part of that consultation. We knew nothing of this until we saw this report. And although I won't be here next year, I know that Councillors Fox and Moynihan and whoever replaces me will definitely want to be part of it, because we want to make sure that it is well managed and continues to be well served. Thank you.
I've got a question on 1.4. So I just wanted a little clarification. The funding stream, the funding agreement, is this distinct, Ruth, from any other contracted or subcontracted service that Green Estate do? So there's a separate stream to cover other aspects that they do both in the ward, but also outside the ward.
These monies are specifically for the management and maintenance of Manor Fields, the SUD scheme on it, and the playground within that area. So they are separate to any other funding arrangements that they may have with other parts of the council. This is a very specific Parks and Countryside.
Thank you very much, because I know they do a lot of other work, subcontracting, for example, on clay wood, and the work that they do there. That's been fantastic. Right, thank you.
Councillor Hooper, and I apologise for forgetting you'd asked to speak.
Thank you very much, yeah. It's just a comment really on process. This report and the following report, we've just received them today. I don't think to do both of them justice, it's not on for the councillors to try and look at them, summarise and make comments in judgment. Both have been signed off by lead officers in February, and it's now the 11th of March. So I would hope this is not going to become common practice, Chair, that we do receive papers in good time so we can give them justice. Thank you, Chair.
I apologise, I'm not quite sure why you've only received them today. They were delayed by one day. They were issued last Monday, so they should have been received a week ago. So I apologise. I'll follow that up and find out what happened to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Thank you. Nobody else? Mary.
Thanks, Chair. Just quickly, thanks for this. I just wondered, it says that it's acknowledged the activities delivered by Green Estate have a positive climate impact, and I think there is consensus that the land is really well managed and managed really holistically. But is there any more information on this? Is there a report on how it's managed? Because I think it would actually be a really good example, especially linking in about the biodiversity and nature recovery and what they do on their sites. It would be useful to sort of have a report to see what they actually do in practice.
So the quick and easy answer is no. But what I would say is that what we're asking for today is permission to carry on as we have done in previous years whilst we work out the process for future years. And it feels entirely appropriate that a report on how the land is currently managed and what we might expect in future years should form part of that decision, including, very importantly, the climate and biodiversity impacts of the work that Green Estate do. And what needs to happen on that site.
Thank you.
Chair, can I just suggest that adding to the work programme, you should have an arduous fact-finding mission to go and visit Manor Fields and Green Estate and see all the work that they do magnificently, and you'll be able to see heaps of biodiversity as well, Marianne.
I think that is an excellent suggestion, which I hope the officers will note. Thank you. Okay. The recommendation has been read out once. I don't think we'll bother to read it out again, which will save about 5 minutes. I will take silence as an approval. Is this recommendation approved? Thank you. That is unanimously approved. Thank you very much. I'd now like to move to item 11, which is an item regarding library opening hours. Thank you. Whilst you've spoken here many times already, I'm not sure, have you actually identified yourself for the benefit of the cameras?
Apologies, Chair, if I haven't. No, I don't think I have. I don't seem to have a nameplate either. Hilary Coulson, I'm the head of Libraries and Archives for the Council. Oh, do I? Oh, I didn't realise you had them. Sorry, Councillor Richards.
Yes, I'm monitor.
You're the custodian of... Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I'll run through the purpose of the report today, and I'll also pick up the second half of Councillor Richards' question that she asked me a little earlier around the wider review of the library service, if that's okay. So, the purpose of the report today is to provide an update to the committee and ask that you endorse our current extended library opening hours. We're also asking, as part of the report, for an endorsement of a proposal to delay slightly the opening of our council-run libraries until lunchtime, kind of one day a month, to allow for some kind of staff training and development. So I'll just kind of run through that. So part of the 23-24, sorry, I'm just making sure that's the right financial year, but it is, it's the financial year that we're in. The budget proposals for this committee was on the assumption that phase 1 of a review of libraries would be included, and that included a review of our opening times. I'm just going to pick up Councillor Richards' wider question around the kind of the second stage of that. So as part of that review, we recognised, given the budget pressures that were fairly imminent, we needed to look at our kind of estate and our operational side of the service. There are other things that we do within the service that we kind of put a pin in at that time. So one of them is around the home library service, and then also around some of the traded services that we have within kind of schools and some of our outreach with young people. And I think when we talk about a second kind of stage of review, those are the things that we know we consciously didn't do the first time. I think there's also been kind of reports around strategic reviews of the library service. Now, for me, that needs to fall within a kind of a wider premise of how the council as a whole wants to look at its face-to-face kind of provision within its local communities, and you would expect rightly that libraries should be kind of at the forefront of that. So as that work progresses as part of the kind of the customer strategy, the community buildings kind of review that's going on, I would expect some of that wider work to be picked up. So that's not covered in this report at the moment. This is a review of the changes that we made last year and an endorsement of that kind of just, I suppose, part one, if you like, of a wider kind of series of reviews. So hopefully that just gives a bit of context. So from April just gone, all of our 11 hub libraries kind of standardised their opening times. The reason that we did this was to try and make sure that the staffing we had could be flexibly kind of spread across our branches, and essentially that when we said that we were going to be open, that we would be open. So within doing that, we also looked at the demand patterns of customers and when people used our branches most to try and make sure that we were open at times when the libraries would be busiest. And then from April 23, we moved to an approach where all of our libraries are open from 10 a.m. till 5 p.m, Monday through Wednesday. There is now a standard midweek close day on a Thursday, that open again 10 till 5 on a Friday, and then 10 till 4 on a Saturday. So that extended our overall opening times from 31 hours to 34 hours. So there was an additional kind of midweek morning that we were open. But we also removed our late afternoon opening, which was originally up until 6:30 until 5 o'clock, reflecting kind of like patterns of use and the busiest times of our libraries. So really this was about a review of that. We promised at committee last time, I think when we were here in February last year, that we would come back. And I think what we also wanted to reflect in is because we had aligned our staffing to our opening times, what that's done is it has made our branches far more kind of stable, if you like. So we have far less ad hoc closures. But it doesn't give our staff teams time to do training, supervisions and development. They have about half an hour if you worked full time in our libraries when you're not open to the customers and the public, and therefore that there is a balance as to kind of what type of support we can invest in our staff and workforce really. So that we were trying to rebalance on that point, so that's where that's come through. So when we looked at the consultation, before we made the changes last year, we went out with a consultation to all of our customers. We've redone that just to make sure that we are kind of reflecting kind of their feedback as well as looking at our visitor times. So that ran between kind of January to February this year, because it was the same time as it did the previous years. And if I just draw your attention to either kind of the paragraphs kind of 3.3 and downwards, or the graphs in the appendix, if you prefer the kind of like the visual part of that. So we had 373 people responding to our surveys. 82% of our respondents were kind of broadly positive about the changes, and 78% said that they either use the libraries the same as they did before the changes, or that they actually use them more because they are open for slightly longer. Obviously, what we wanted to unpick was the people who were saying that they were using our service less. So there were 56 respondents who solely use our community hub libraries, who stated that they did use our libraries less than before. So that accounted for about 15% of people that responded to us, which was slightly less than we anticipated. We were thinking about 17% when we ran the original consultation. So we were pleased to see that it wasn't more. The majority of those responses were around the removal of the late afternoon opening time. So we absolutely acknowledge that that has impacted on some people. We haven't changed the late evening opening that happens at Central Library until 8 o'clock. We are open, obviously, on a Saturday across all of our branches for a full Saturday now. But we do recognise that there are some compromises with removing some of that hour and a half of the late afternoon closures. What we also have reflected, though, is that over the last year, our visits have gone up quite significantly. So we have got about 750,000 visits to our libraries for the last 10 months, compared to about 625,000, which obviously is brilliant. We're not quite back up to pre-pandemic levels, but we're certainly going in the right trajectory, and hopefully the increased opening hours will be supporting that as well. So really the reasons for the recommendation are trying to provide our library customers with the optimum available hours that we can, to make sure that we provide stable staffing resources to those opening hours, but also that opening later for half a day, 1 day per month, will allow us to invest in our training and development for our staff teams. So for that, I'll just run through the recommendations, if that's okay. We were recommending that the committee note the contents of the report and the data analysis that's summarised in Appendix 1, that you endorse the changes in opening hours and that these will continue as the standard opening hours for our council-run hub libraries, and also approve the proposal for those council-run hub libraries to open at a later time, 1 day per month, to allow for training and development. Obviously happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for the report. Councillor Richards.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask a question on, I think it's 3.6, that the majority of customer demand showed more people use the library in the morning than after 5 p.m. Is that an age-related thing, that older people, like me, prefer to go to the library in the morning, and that possibly it would be younger people who'd want to use a library later in an evening, perhaps people who work or things like that?
So I think with the customer usage patterns, because we count visits, not necessarily library members who are borrowing books at that time, then obviously we don't have, I can't absolutely say kind of hand on heart that we can break down it to kind of customer kind of age groups that we could do if we were just looking at borrowing rates for members. What we did reflect on though is that actually there's a whole range of age groups that use our libraries through and mid-morning, particularly schools as well. So actually if schools want to visit us, they would normally do so in a morning, and they only had 3 midweek mornings to do that rather than 4 midweek mornings that there are now. So yes, I think there will be a point where there will be different age demographics, but I wouldn't say it was solely one age demographic that would use it later or earlier. We know that for people who do kind of work kind of full-time, not near a library, and happen to work on a Thursday and a Saturday, actually visits to the kind of the community hub libraries are a challenge. That's why we were obviously keen to maintain the late night opening within Central to try and balance that out.
Are there any other questions or comments? Yes, Councillor.
Just very briefly, if you ran this slightly later, would you think you might have got a different result? I mean, had it bedded in by the point you took the data to find out what the response was going to be?
Thank you. We did actually think quite carefully about when to run it. So we ran the original consultation January to February and then made the changes in April 2023, so effectively kind of last calendar year, this financial year. Recognising the point that we were discussing earlier around the finances and the fact that we had quite high vacancy rates, what we saw is quite a lot of unplanned ad hoc closures, particularly at lunchtimes, over the spring and into kind of summer, early autumn. We intentionally didn't run the survey at that point because we knew that customers rightly would be feeding back that actually the unplanned closures were impacting their usage of the libraries. What we wanted to do was to make sure that we got those vacancies recruited to, that we were open when we said we were going to be open, and then to review it. So I had a bit of scribble down about the times, if you like, that the library service had been closed unexpectedly. So from November, I think we were closed for an hour and a half across all of our estate where we anticipated being open. So that could have been half an hour at lunchtime at a particular branch. I think December was 9 hours, January 3, February 0. So we tried to make sure that our opening times were stable so that people were actually using us when we were open. I think there is a benefit trying to run it in the same way at the same time of year as we ran the original consultation, because it does make it comparable. And we'd left it for about kind of 10 months to let those kind of bed in and people, if you like, get used to that change.
So you're creating like a steady state before you asked people in to talk about it?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. There's nobody else has indicated to speak. I have a couple of questions, if I may. I assume that this morning of closure for training, it's not going to be all the same, all the libraries at the same time.
So I think that might depend on what the training is. I think where we are trying to do a whole staff event, there is a point where actually we have to allow our kind of staff time to do that. And I know that other people have asked me, can you not just do that on a Thursday when our branches are closed? What that means is that for our full-time workers, actually we're asking them to work 6 days a week that week rather than kind of 5. And it feels like that's over and above their day job rather than it being kind of part of their day job. So yes, I think there will be times through the year when we do that. I think we need to look at what our training provision is, whether that is face-to-face with a specific kind of training company, or if that is kind of work shadowing supervisions, which obviously we can spread around a little more. Where we can, we will try and obviously spread that across our branches so that it doesn't feel quite as all or nothing for our customers. But I think there will be times during the year where we will need to kind of make the most of it as a whole service.
Okay, thank you. And just another point, now that you're closed on Thursdays, where there is an established community group who Thursday is the only option, what facility is there for them?
So for our established groups that were there on a Thursday, for the branches that weren't closed on Thursdays originally, although the majority of our branches actually were shut on Thursdays beforehand, we have tried to either look at another time of day or a day of the week that will be better for them to come and access the library, or for some of our regular groups there are procedures, that's the word I'm looking for, procedures in place to allow them to effectively become key holders of the library so they can use it out of hours. So that already existed kind of before this proposal for some of our groups. So we've looked to try and give both of those options.
Okay, thank you. On that basis then, we have had the recommendation that Hilary has read out, so I won't read it out again, but are we all agreed to go with that recommendation? That is unanimously agreed. Thank you. Thank you for your report. Item 12 is feedback from the Task and Finish group. I believe that's you again, Ruth.
Thank you, Chair. Can I start by letting everyone know that Rowan, who was the author of this report, is unfortunately unwell, so I'm presenting this today in her absence. What that does mean is if there are any particularly technical questions asked, I might need to take them back to her and get you an answer afterwards, and apologies for that. Again, I'm not proposing to go through the report line by line, but Councillor Hooper, I suspect this is the second report that you received late. So I appreciate that you might not have read it all. As you were on the Task and Finish group, though, I hope there are absolutely no surprises in it. Just to recap, if that's okay, the Task and Finish group from this committee met 5 times between July 2023 and January 2024. Membership for that group was drawn equally from the 3 political parties on this committee. And all members were from this committee, although where people weren't able to attend, substitutes were drawn from elsewhere. For example, Councillor Holmeshaw attended a couple of those meetings as a substitute, and also officers from various services across the council attended, depending on the agenda item. In the early meetings, a bit of a stakeholder mapping exercise was done, and the group was extended to include key partners in the city, so not exclusively people within the council. The people that attended were Sheffield and Rotherham Wildlife Trust, Green Estate. That gentleman is also the chair of the Green Spaces Forum, which represents the friends groups across the city, and also the Eastern Moors Partnerships. During the 5 sessions that were held, a range of topics were covered, which briefed members on the issues impacting the biodiversity crisis, the Council's biodiversity duty, and opportunities to work collectively with communities and partners to halt species decline within the city and the country. Summaries of the session are included in the report at Appendix 2, and the report contains a very long list of recommendations which came from the meetings and the discussions that were had by the group. There are 18 recommendations listed. I'm not proposing to go through them in turn, if that's okay, but I do think it's fair to say that we could have easily had a list of 50 recommendations, because such were the discussions and the positive input from everybody that attended, both from the members that attended, officers from across the council, and also those external partners. We've tried to narrow it down to a fairly succinct, clear list where we think that this committee can make a difference within the city and the council. There are other asks that we could have made, but some of those it felt like they would perhaps sit outside of this committee, so it didn't necessarily feel appropriate to put them in the report. But I think we had conversations with other parts of the council, and their engagement with this process will have hopefully kick-started some of that work happening elsewhere. You'll also see in the report that Appendix 1 is a document titled First Consideration for Biodiversity Report. The document and the contents of that document was discussed through the meetings, and it's included as one of the recommendations excuse me, that the contents of that report be approved by this committee, for that report to then be shared with DEFRA, updating on them on how we're complying with the biodiversity duty for local authorities as was set out in the 2021 Environment Act. So just to recap the ask of committee in the formal wording, I'll read the recommendations direct from the report, if that's okay. We'd ask that the Communities, Parks and Leisure Policy Committee note the contents of the report and thank everyone involved in the productive and useful discussions had during the task and finish group. And I do think that's a really important one. People engaged really well from lots of different places, and the conversations were interesting and informative and also enjoyable because of everybody's enthusiasm for things that they perhaps knew a little about or a lot about. People wanted to learn more and input into the conversation, which was just really, really refreshing. The committee is also asked to endorse the recommendations proposed by the task and finish group, so that's that list of 18 that exist within the report, and then also approve the first consideration for biodiversity report, which is a bit of a wordy document that we would then submit to DEFRA to say this is how we're responding to the asks of us as a local authority.
Thank you very much, and I have to say it was a really interesting report. It made me feel quite envious that I didn't actually put myself on that particular group, but it was a tremendous piece of work, and I hope that it's the start of something rather than a conclusion. If anybody's got any comments and questions, I'm happy to take them. Particularly interested in those who are actually on the task and finish group to find out what that experience was like. Councillor Hooper was first, and I assume.
Thanks, Chair, you can see from the report how detailed it is. To try and cover the amount of stuff that's in here, in committee here, would be virtually impossible. We came a long way. Slow start, but a big finish. And lots of partners came on board, so it was really good. I think it was really good. But like I've said before, this committee is so diverse. We've got so much to look at. It's very difficult. Thanks for my colleagues on the working group. I think we've got there. Section 5, complying with the statutory parts of the guidance. I think there's some statutory stuff that needs doing by spring from the Combined Mayor Authority. So, we're sort of parting shot. I think we need a meeting with Rowan and everybody else in late autumn to make sure we've got that ready and give us time to ensure that that report is completed. And again, thanks to Rowan Longhurst for the stuff that she's done. We've had a couple of site visits and the work that was happened. But again, without the working group, this would have never been produced. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Ruth. I just want to say, it is a really good and productive and positive report. I wanted to mention one omission, which I think sort of came to light as we went through the meetings, is that we didn't have representation from the Waterways Network. And I think with hindsight, they should have been included as a stakeholder, because obviously Sheffield's rivers and blue infrastructure play a really crucial part in our local nature corridors. So I hope that in future partnership work that is led by the council, such as the Green and Open Spaces strategy, which should arguably be the green and blue infrastructure strategy, so hopefully they'll be included in further work. I know that they're included in the LNRS work at regional level. But in the main, yeah, it's a really good productive report. It shows a really positive step in the right direction, and certainly for me as chair, I found it a really valuable exercise, getting councillors and officers and partners all in the room together, you know, with that shared understanding and looking at land management through the lens of nature recovery. So also want to give massive thanks to Rowan for pulling it together, for you, Ruth, and our council ecologist, Chris, and all the partners for their expertise, and I hope we'll all accept the recommendations.
Thank you. I think Councillor Hoover
just come back on that. Yeah, the waterways. We had two chaps that came to our LAC meeting last week who were doing work on the waterways and rivers. Most of the rivers go through either South West LAC or the North LAC, so yeah, they were quite interested in they're doing measurements on invertebrates. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Holmshaw and then Councillor Downing.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you everyone who was in the task and finish. It was really enjoyable to be part of the group. And I think biodiversity and how to mitigate it, I'm no expert, and so, you know, it's good to find out myself such a lot of information. And it's not an easy concept to get over, I think, for most people. So it's good to see that on number 17 you've got agrees to develop a communication plan. So that will be quite critical to be able to put this forward. So we get the Sheffield public as part of this as well. And also, I love the idea that my idea about biodiversity awards has been included as a possibility. Yeah, so it's not have to be looked at whether we do a kind of awards ceremony or whatever that shapes up as. My question is, though, is there going to be a named officer in any of the areas mentioned? Because on page 26, we've got quite a comprehensive list at C, section 5C, of different departments that are actually going to be key to making this actually work for the city. So are they going to be named officers, be the points of contact in that service area, planning, landscape design, active travel design, roads, you know, getting the hedgehogs across the road safely is one thought, and on all those kind of facilities management as well. So if you could answer that or give me an idea towards how that's going to be done.
The quick answer is I'm not sure. I think it makes sense for there to be either a named person or a named department. I think one of the things with everything that's in this report is that it's very rare that it is one person. It's very rare that it's one department. It is the whole council, and it's lots of departments working together. So do you mind if I come back to you with a do we have an answer to that question? And if we don't have an answer to that question now, what might we need to do to get you an answer?
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Downing.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was very interesting, the task and finish group. I was sceptical when I went on it because I didn't know what to expect of it all, but it was really uplifting and eye-opening. Some of the things you went to visit was absolutely amazing, and some of the wildlife we saw while we were out and about as well. But just to sort of echo what Marianne said, we do need the rivers and waterways on board with this, because there's so much ecological stuff to go alongside all that. And so, but yeah, and I'd like to say thank you very much to all the people that were on the task and finish group, and to the officers, and especially to Rowan, who did a fantastic job. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tony. Finally, Councillor Rice.
Yeah, I was a member of this group, often remote, joining in from my office at work. So yeah, thank you so much for firstly setting this up and the direction that Councillor Elliott and yourselves gave on this. The report, beautifully comprehensive. It also opens up a wider question within the council. This was such a broad and cross-cutting exercise. Obviously, we've got our own learnings within communities, parks and leisure. Will there be an opportunity to kind of at a later date understand how this work is being adopted and viewed across other departments, housing, transport, waste and street scene, because everyone has got a say in this, not just us within CPL.
I probably don't have a full answer for you. What I will say is that I think the Task and Finish group brought departments that were already relatively close, even closer together, because you'll know that Victoria from Climate Change and colleagues from Planning attended every single session because it was really clear that this isn't just a parks and countryside issue. The other thing that's happened fairly recently is there's been some recruitment to an assistant director over in Will Stewart's area, which is, I can't recall the exact title of the post, apologies, but it is around climate change, sustainability, and it also has nature within the role. So we are establishing it as a key thing in the council that needs to be responded to, and we'll be working very closely with that person to make sure that those people that need to be thinking about this are thinking about it going forward.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councillor Elliott.
I just wanted to ask a quick question on behalf of Bernard Little, who was on the group also. So he just wanted to follow up because I think being a member of the planning committee, his question is around training for people on that committee, and I think that could probably be extended to all councillors who would like to know more, particularly with BNG coming in, if briefings could possibly be available on the local nature recovery strategy led by the region and also BNG and the implications for the council.
Yes, what I'll do is I'll talk to planning colleagues about how we lead that, and I think what we should do is have the same training delivered to different places, because actually I think that a number of people, this committee would really benefit from that, because obviously it really impacts on parks land, but planning as well, possibly even housing. So we'll look at what training we can arrange and see if we can have it delivered across multiple committees so that people can hear exactly what it means to them on their committee area.
That'd be really useful, thank you.
Okay, thank you. There is a recommendation which has been read out. Before I ask for your opinion on that, I'd just like to thank, I believe Councillor Elliott took over chair of the Task and Finish group, and based on the report, you obviously done a very good job. And I'd like to thank those members who did sit on it, because there was a hint of cynicism about the whole process at the start, whether Task and Finish groups actually achieve anything. And clearly you do. So well done. And also, could we formally thank Rowan for her work, and I would have done that if she'd been here today. So the recommendation is what Ruth read out. Are we all agreed? Thank you, that is formally approved. We have 2 more items to go. We are rapidly running out of time. I don't think it's going to take till 5 o'clock, but can I seek your approval to extend till 5 o'clock? I'm conscious that many of you have other places to be, but I think the 2 officers who still have to report deserve the opportunity to do so without time pressure. Is that okay? I might come to that. So, in that case, item 13 is a verbal update on tramlines.
That's me again. So I'm just here to give a very brief update about tramlines. You're probably all aware that the event takes place in Hillsborough Park, which is one of our charitable parks. What that means is that the decision as to whether to agree to the ongoing hosting of tramlines was therefore taken at the Charity Trustee Subcommittee. That meeting happened, thank you very much. That meeting happened last Monday the 4th of March. The report that went to that committee, that subcommittee, set out in particular what has changed since this last year's event. You'll all recall the last year's event, there was some very extreme weather, and the park was very badly damaged as a result of the event. So the report talked about the learning that has happened since the festival last year, and the focus that has been put on protecting the park, particularly in the event of extreme weather, and what cancellation of the event would look like, for example. The report discussed in a closed appendix the proposed fee structure, which was set out for a 5-year period, and it also set out in the main report a commitment that some of the fee from tramlines be spent in the park on non-standard work, so not maintenance or management of the park that we do day to day, so that the residents of Hillsborough and also city residents who visit the park from wherever they live can hopefully see a positive impact of the festival within the park. The committee did agree the recommendations. I'm just going to read out the recommendations just so that you can see exactly what was approved, if that's okay. So the Charity Trustee Subcommittee was asked to: Number 1, agree that the hosting of the Tramlines Festival in Hillsborough Park represents a positive and beneficial use of the park, bearing in mind the Hillsborough Park charity objectives. You'll all know that the Charity Trustee Subcommittee have to make their decisions based on what is in the interest of the charity. They were asked to approve the licence agreement heads of terms, and that was included as an appendix to the report. They were asked to approve the income to the charity as set out in that closed fee schedule on the basis that it represents and supports positive and beneficial use of Hillsborough Park, having regard to the charity's objectives, and that it would benefit the Hillsborough Park charity. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, agree that £10,000 of the annual fee should be used to improve, replace or install equipment or facilities to improve the park for the benefit of park users, which would not otherwise have been possible using the council's revenue grant to the Hillsborough Park charity.
Thank you for that report. Did you want to ask a comment, question? Okay, I don't, because the decision's been made, this is really for noting, but I'll take one question, if I may.
Thanks, Ruth. I think obviously the decision's been made, and there are clear benefits to the city to have tram lines, financially and culturally. But I think the benefits to the park and the community is not quite as clear cut. And obviously the resilience of the park is paramount, so that the community can enjoy their park. So is that money that's been allocated, is that going to be sufficient for the drainage works that need to take place, etc.? Because obviously we've heard from the Green Estates report, how much it costs to manage land in a responsible way. So is there going to be enough to be able to cover that?
So yeah, just to be really clear, the decision was made. So obviously, what we can't do is rehash that here. But to be clear, the report set out a fee structure. So that is the amount that Tramlines will pay the council to host that event in Hillsborough Park. Of that fee, a proportion, £10,000, will be spent on things that are not business as usual in the park. And then, as has been the case for, I believe, all the years that Tramlines have held the event in Hillsborough Park, Tramlines are required to return the park to the state that it was before they arrived. So the drainage works that have taken place, anything that's needed to happen as a result of the event, since it happened in July last year, I think it was, Tramlines have paid for that. So actually what's happened since the event is Tramlines have paid money for works in the park to improve, to both return it to the state that it was before the event, but also then they have put additional monies in to improve things in the park, including drainage. There's been actually quite a lot of additional works done since the event, which has been done sort of in a bit of a three-way stream, I think it is. So firstly, Tramlines have paid monies to return, for example, the main field back to how it was. Obviously, that's taken a lot of work. Tramlines have put some money into widen and improve one of the paths in the park that had really struggled as a result of just a lot of use, both in the event and also just general use. And then also the council and Tramlines have put monies into drainage to try and improve it for future years, both for use for Tramlines and for other events. Does that make sense?
So Tramlines are part covering the new drainage system and the council are paying for some of it. Okay. Could I just ask a quick question about re-entry as well? Because I wasn't clear on this. I think it's quite clear that it would be better for Hillsborough if people could actually go and use the local facilities there. But my understanding is that the operator have got quite a lot of restrictions on re-entry. Is that negotiable at all?
No, it's not. I believe that re-entry is linked to the safety advisory group's recommendations on the event, and that I think it's worth saying that's the sort of thing that was discussed in Charity Trustee Subcommittee. There isn't a further decision to be made on that.
Okay, thank you very much. As I say, it was just an update, which has been useful. I hope the members have appreciated it. I committed to making sure that this committee knew as much about it as possible. So we've noted that, and thank you for your report.
Sorry, Councillor Williams, the only other thing to say is that if it would be helpful to this committee, we'd be happy to bring a report to the next committee, which we don't have a date for, but talking about sort of the wider park implications of the decision for tramline. So what does it mean for events in parks? What might it mean for other events? We'd be happy to do that if it would be helpful, if this committee wants to add that to their work programme.
I think that'd be a good idea, because we're in a strange situation where we don't look after events, but they are held in parks. We don't manage all the parks because some of them are charity parks, but I think the more information we have about this and the early inputs can only help. So thank you. Can we put that on the work programme? Thank you. The final item of this year is one close to my heart. I had the privilege of going along to the election results night for the Youth Cabinet, and it's the young residents of Sheffield are something we should be very proud of, and I've invited the Head of Youth Services to come and give an update on the Youth Council. So thank you and welcome. Could you introduce yourself, please, for the benefit of the audiences?
Hi, yeah, so I've pretty much met everybody, I think. Chelsea Renahan, Head of Community Youth Services, and obviously...
And I'm Lorraine Wood, Interim Director of Communities.
So it's a short update. The paper is simply an update to note the work that we're doing with our Youth Council and Youth Parliament, but by extension what that means for our young residents and the voice that they're having in the city and decision making within the city. There's two recommendations in the paper, exactly what I've just said. So to note Sheffield Youth Cabinet and by extension our Youth Parliament, and by extension of that to note the increased participation of young residents in their local democratic structures, decision making in their communities across the city, and then also just a simple note for them of actually some of the work they've done nationally as well. There is a slide deck that goes into a lot more detail. You'll be grateful of the time back, I'm sure, so I'm not going to go into the detail, but it also has the links of the 3 films that young people have made as well, so please do check that out. By way of the Youth Council, our Youth Cabinet that we have in Sheffield, so when we first developed Community Youth Services infrastructure, the structure, a couple of years ago, we started with 25 places, and if you remember when I presented quite some time back, we updated that we increased that to 45 to make sure that we were having a real diverse range of young people. It was representative of the local area committees, of the wards that they live in, but then also with a series of safeguarded places for underrepresented groups as well. We've now seen those places being quite significantly filled we've got young people with special educational needs. We've got a very diverse group of young people from our LGBTQ+ community. In terms of our racial equalities and our diversity around that, we're very represented of our young people and our young resident population, and that then also spans across the city as well through the youth elections. I'm going to hit to the punchline first because I think that's what Richard's waiting for. This year we did our youth elections. We do them every 2 years, and then from those youth elections, the Youth Cabinet will then vote on their UK Youth Parliament representative. The turnout, we had 69 candidates across the city for our for our Sheffield Youth Cabinet elections. And in terms of ballot votes, we had 12,074, which is a 1 in 4 of our young resident population, which I'm sure you'll agree is absolutely fantastic. I think what we want to celebrate in this is not just the numerical turnout and what that means in our young residents engaging and embracing their ability to critically think about issues that affect them, but also what that means in preparation for them becoming young residents within their communities and having that more abstract awareness and that bigger vision and how they communicate with their peers that they may not ordinarily communicate with. I want to go through what is slide 5, so if you want to reference that, it is in more detail and the links to the films are there. There's another figure in that which is really positive. What we've been able to do just this last financial year is engage individually 1,774 young people in localised democratic voice. That might be their local consultation through the LAC conferences. It could be a consultation. So, for example, we did some work in Park and Arbourthorne. We had 217 young people respond to that. We've done work with vaping and tobacco campaigns. We've done work with perinatal mental health. We've done a lot of work in terms of our green agenda and our environmental agenda and climate. Violence against women and girls, city goals. I mean, we could go on forever and a day if I was to go through these slides. 1,774 individual young people alongside a collective sort of expression of 12,000 young people in the city compared to a group of 25 when I first got here 2 years ago is a phenomenal achievement, and I think it would be unfair not to take the opportunity to also just take this moment, if I can, to note thanks to the team as well, the Youth Voice and Influence team. They've worked incredibly hard. Our next priority is to get young people employed as young influencers on 6-hour-a-week contracts. We have some posts for that. So they will then be allocated to projects. We have a Sending Voices group, which is ever increasing, and they worked on our Send Accelerated Progress Plan for Ofsted. That was an incredible achievement. They presented at the Inclusion Board about what they wanted. They're now wanting to take that one step further. And similar to the films we've been able to produce over the year, they want to produce a film about what it means to be a young person with special educational needs and disabilities within the city and what the city looks like for them, which I think is going to be a fantastic contribution and open a really interesting dialogue, and obviously offer that to elected members. I think it's worth noting our young residents and the team themselves have won 5 awards this year. They've been quite humble by that. So they've won 2 locally. They've won British Youth Council Project Campaign of the Year for their tobacco project. And they've also won a regional award for the Be That Mate film, Social Action Project of the Year. Yeah, I think by way of update, like I said, I could go on forever and a day, and it is all in there. We're really looking forward to developing an arts programme, and we're working with Create Sheffield on some of the funding bids that they've written. So we're awaiting the funding outcome for that. And we're going to be doing, in relation to the belonging framework that we're all working on, and obviously that's linking to the city goals, we committed to a citywide young resident survey. The team they've set the bar high for themselves, so in terms of turnout, that is going to be a questionnaire, a significant size questionnaire to our young residents using the same methodology we used for the elections, in the hopes that actually if we can get that same turnout with questions around all departments, all thematic areas, actually the voice that we can capture of young residents, start integrating that into our communities, our infrastructure, our decision making, our design, is going to be quite worthwhile. Yeah, pretty much.
Thank you very much for that report. Are the slides you referred to, have they been circulated? Could you circulate them, please?
We will circulate them, yes.
Thank you very much. And I would
Absolutely.
recommend again, you all have,
Videos.
have another view of those 3 great videos.
Yeah,
I've
they're
got a few
amazing.
people who've
Oh,
indicated.
sorry, that was me. Can I just ask that you send them to all councillors, not just this committee, so that we're all aware of it?
Good idea.
Yeah, no, we can do, and we'll put it out with your member bulletin as well that Rachel sent, and also we'll give you the names of your LAC youth counsellors as well for each LAC area, so you'll get that information at the same time.
Councillor McGowan, you've indicated you want to speak.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say absolutely amazing, outstanding, fantastic. Can't wait to start engaging with these young people. And one thing I'd really, really like is to see them try and encourage more young people to come to our LAC meetings. Even if they don't come to the LAC meetings, some way for us to engage with them, because we have youth on our, as one of our priorities. But I don't think we engage very well. So even if it's, you know, I know it's intimidating, it's at night, it's a bit, can be a bit of a boring meeting. So, but if we could find some way to engage with them, whether it, you know, in some way, then and do that, definitely want to work with them, and for them to be involved in. They've been elected just like we have, so that for them to be round the table helping us make decisions would be really, really useful. I know sometimes it's a bit confidential, some of the stuff that we discuss, but where it's not, I have no problem. I think it'd be great.
So some of so priorities for 24-25 is to increase that LAC work. We've done some LAC conferences, and that seems to be really helpful. Young people have, so this year our youth grants, young people scored all of our youth grants, which was up to 300k. We're looking at it, sorry, last year. We're looking at it again this year. I think a really helpful way of engaging young residents will also be in how LAC spend their youth grants, and working with the elected LAC representatives on the youth cabinet, and then bringing young people in that way. So that's one of the areas of work that's a priority for 24-25.
Thank you. Councillor Hooper.
Yeah, very, very quickly, Chair, yeah. We have had some of the Youth Council come to one of our LACs, but I think if we can't get them to come to us, I think perhaps we may need to go to them, into school. Could have a LAC meeting with them, yeah. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chelsea, but I believe there were 2 schools who had 100% vote engagement. Can you remember which they were?
Do you know what? Of all of the information I've been given here, the 2 things that I haven't been given, no. We had, so they get given awards for democracy. So we had 3 schools that got over 50% of their student population who had voted. We had 6 that got silver, which is over 70% of their student population who voted. We had 2 schools that got over 90% of their student population that voted. I do know one of them was Fairvale. I can't remember the second one. I apologise.
I think the other one was Forge Valley. It was loads.
It was Forge Valley.
Yeah. Thank you.
Privilege of the chair.
It was Forge Valley and Fairvale, which, you know, is amazing. 100%. Wow.
Okay, well, thank you. That Councillor Halshaw. Okay. Yeah, again, thank you. That report needs to be noted. Is that noted? Thank you for all the work you do. That actually concludes our business for the year. Can I just say a great thank you to all of you. I think we achieved a lot this year. And thanks to the officers, obviously, without which we would probably achieve very little. Thanks to Councillor Elliott, who was started as group spokesperson and got promoted to deputy chair. But equally, thank you to Councillor Riddler, who couldn't be here today, who went the other way through no fault of her own, I assure you. But thanks again, and see you next year, maybe.